Hello and welcome back to the NAS Metal Britoka's channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another end of the decade list. So, for today's end of the decade list, I'm going to be taking the time to at least rank my favorite extreme metal albums, which is basically what falls in the extreme metal genre. Of course, is like death metal, black metal, grindcore, gore grind, death grind, whatever the hell you want to kind of consider that. Your black metal, I think I might have just already, war metal, whatever. That's just stuff that really kind of just falls under the extreme metal tag. And of course, now this is probably one of the least genres I actually kind of gave at least attention to during the 2010s. Like, I did listen to at least a bit of these kind of albums, but to be quite honest, what really dominated a lot of the 2010s, of course, is, well, the more classic metal genres. Again, something like thrash metal, hard rock, stoner, doom metal, actually, though. That's probably the one that really kind of at least stretched out a bit to really kind of give that genre a chance. But for some reason, though, death metal or these kind of extreme metal genres, I didn't really give much attention towards. So, to be quite honest, it would be interesting. But I wanted at least kind of wanted to take the time and actually kind of again give attention to this genre. At least talk about it at least before at least these end of the decade list. And kind of pay homage to this genre. So without further ado, since I'm just been babbling on, let's just get right into it. Again, I only picked about 8 albums, so, or at least actually 8 releases, because there's at least an EP here. So we're just going to go with at least 8 releases. That's why I went with. But I will definitely give an honorable mention to at least one album. I can also give an honorable mention to, of course, Master, which is actually the band that's playing in the background. The fact that I end up forgetting about putting these guys in the list is a kind of criminal, because these guys are underrated. Definitely one of the earliest death metal bands, that's for sure. Again, Paul Speckman and co., great guys, but I just forgot to. But this is an album that, what is it? What album is this? Let me go back. Let me go right here. An Epiphany of Hate, which was released back in 2016. But again, forgot about it. Anyway, but the album I am definitely giving an honorable mention to is this one, which for some reason I just could never figure out what list to put in. To be quite honest, I just couldn't. It's a good album, but this, of course, is Orphix. I think is the best. I think pronounced. Of course, this is the was it second full-length album, I guess, called Machine Gun Reaper, which was released back in what year was this? Was it 2017? 2017. It was released. God, I forgot. Was it Brazil, Portugal? Where the Colombia? Jeez, for some reason it's not good. I don't know. I forgot where he's Orphix from, but it's just this one guy here, which of course is the guy that's on the front cover and the guy that's right there. So it is, of course, can't get any more. The thing that I have an issue when trying to put this in a list, is that it's definitely close. It's definitely got that black metal influence for sure. But the thing is, the thing that kind of ends up being difficult to kind of want to throw this album in one of these lists is because of, well, it's black metal, but at the same time, it's very more rooted within classic heavy metal. Think more so the Polish band Cat. The very first album, Metal from Hell, I think it was titled. Think more like that. It's very within line of that. At times, maybe the really early Bathory stuff, like the very first album. But again, it's more rooted within classic metal. I almost was throwing this within the speed metal ounce, but to be quite honest, even that, it doesn't completely go, it doesn't at least fit in. So it was really kind of difficult. So within the extreme metal genre, since of course this is a bit of a form of black metal in ways, though again, more close to the first wave style black metal stuff, at least is deserving of being mentioned within this video. So that's why this is the video I chose to at least give a mention to. So, honorable mention, Machine Gun Reaper by Orfix. Orfix. Alright, so here we go. The actual list here is classic Brazilian thrash metal band. Even though they are considered one of the earliest sort of, was it black death metal bands or something like that. One of the first, again, Vulcano. This was around, that was released back in 2014, actually, not 2015. The US CD release, it definitely came out in 2015. Again, this is Holy Wicked, and of course, it's one of the albums since with the new guy on vocals, who is once again, it's always oh, here we go, right here, Luis Carlos Lozada. On band, of course, debut with the band in the beginning of the decade, actually. And again, there's been quite a bit of albums that Vulcano released in the 2010s. But this was Holy Wicked, and this is actually the only one I actually own from this lineup. I did check out the Man the Beast. Was it the Man the Key the Beast? I think is what the album prior to this one was. Again, it took me but a while though to really kind of get into this album. Because of, it's definitely not the sort of classic Vulcano sound of the earlier albums, especially Bloody Vengeance and those kind of albums, or Anthropophagy. It just doesn't have quite it's definitely a little more modern sound, a little more down-tuned. Definitely sounding more and more brand between death and thrash, which is, again, kind of though typical of the Brazilian thrash sound. But, again, these guys were one of the first to really kind of get the thrash sound, but make it more raw, or definitely more closer to, again, death metal. They were the first ones to do it, along with Sepultura and Sarcophago and those bands. But still, it took me a while to really get into this. But you know what? When I revisit this album to put together these lists, you know what? It clicked. It's definitely a fine album. 33 minutes, very short, but you know what? It's perfect for this album. So I'm definitely starting to get I'm coming around to this. Whether or not if I like it more than Man the Key the Beast, which I thought was, again, it was like so same old within this, but I don't know, I think it's both the two were just decent albums, but this one I'm actually getting around, warming up to. So here at number 8, Holy Wicked by Vulcano. Now, coming at number 7 is, well, probably the only war metal album in there, and again, This ain't for everyone. I understand it. This is going to be something that's just not for everyone, especially within the extreme metal genre. There's definitely bands that are just not for everyone, but this is one of them. This is Revenge, which is Behold Total Rejection. Again, Revenge are a Canadian black death metal band formed in the 1990s, I think late 90s, early 2000s. Kind of, I guess, formed out of the ashes of the band Conqueror. Again, if you ever heard Conqueror, this is gonna be no different. This is what to expect. I mean, the style of black death metal here is very much what is what's described as war metal. Again, a subgenre of black metal, but more chaotic. This is fucking chaotic. I mean, if anyone was to describe to you how death, destruction, and famine or whatever, if it ever had a sound, this is it. It's completely, to some, this is almost retarded how fucking ridiculous this album, or at least what this sounds like. But it's just the way it is. It's the best way I think to describe it. It's ridiculous, but I don't mind it at all. Again, not for everyone. If you ever tried to give this band a chance and it ain't for you, I completely understand. But you know what? I don't mind it. It's definitely not for the faint of heart, I guess you could say. It's just not for everyone, but again, I dig it. So there, again, it was released back in 2015 through Season of Mist under their underground activist line. Again, just a solid album from Revenge. So there, that's at number 7. Now, coming on number 6 is the why I kind of would say this is more my favorite extreme metal releases, and not just albums, because this is what I was alluding to. It's an EP. Only one I own from this band. This, of course, is Cropsy Maniac with their Carnage EP, which was released just last year. Again, this is definitely more death metal. Though, at times you can almost say grindcore, I guess, but it's definitely death metal, though more short and fast. Again, more inspired by horror films, because, I mean, if you were to at least look at the titles of the songs, they're all named after the respective films. Brain Scan, named after the 1994 horror movie, which, of course, starred Edward Furlong and Frank Langella. And, of course, The Devil's Reign being number 2, which, of course, was an old 70s horror film that had William Shatner in it. And, of course, The Carpenter, late 80s horror film. Slaughterhouse, I think, was another late 80s horror film. Blood Beach, I think, was a 1970s horror film. The Beast Within was an early 80s horror film. And, of course, Rabid being a late 70s horror film. Of course, one I am really familiar with. Definitely one of my favorites from director David Cronenberg. And, of course, the last track, Without Warning. Another sort of late 70s horror film, though more science fiction as well. Anyways, that just gives you the taste of what to expect from Cropsy Maniac. And, of course, the name Cropsy Maniac is inspired by the slasher character Cropsy in the movie The Burning from 1981. 1982, I think, just around that time frame. Again, just a solid death metal EP, so they're at number 6. Now, at number 5, this one does kind of, though this one was a little more easier for me to kind of throw within the extreme metal. I mean, I could have thrown this within also the speed of thrash metal, but in this case, this actually, I would say, definitely falls under here. This, of course, is Barbarian, with The Cult of the Empty Grave, which was released back in 2016 through Hell's Headbangers Records. These guys are Italian, and their brand of metal is basically what happens if Manowar and Celtic Frost tried to play death metal. That's the best way you can put it. That's like, what, epic, classic, death, heavy metal, or whatever. It's definitely more of the classic kind of sounding stuff. I guess more classic metal, branding extreme metals within this list. But it is a damn good album. I mean, how can you not like the infectiousness of the song Absolute Metal? Come on. It's a fucking awesome tune. If you definitely want to check out any album that you might feel comfortable listening to, check out Absolute Metal. That is definitely going to be one that could definitely inspire you to want to actually check this band out. It's just great. I get pretty much the Manowar of the extreme metal genre, I guess you could say, in here. Of course, killer artwork, definitely, but again, of course, what you expect from what the band sounds like, just good stuff. So, Cult of the Empty Grave by Barbarian at number 5. Now, coming in at number 4 is probably the most well-regarded death metal bands within the genre. This, of course, is Deicide, with, of course, To Hell with God. Now, this is probably, I guess, the way people have, as far as relationship with thrash metal bands like Slayer, I would say Deicide definitely kind of falls within there. Again, it almost seems like I think I'm one of those bands where either people love them or they hate them in many ways, because of the fact that many people definitely highly regard the earlier Deicide albums with, of course, the Hoffman brothers as absolute death metal classics. But since then, it's always been kind of difficult for people. Of course, it also going to come down even to Glenn Benton, who definitely is definitely a interesting figure within the death metal genre. I mean, especially in the night, the guy is a crazy fucker who definitely is able to definitely have people talking, and that's for damn sure. I guess what you can say, what the Ted Nugent of death metal, I guess you can say, a guy that definitely, though more in other different ways. Anyway, This, of course, is one of the later albums. This is actually one of the first Deicide albums, at least album that Deicide released in the 2010s. And this was actually the first, I guess, new release I purchased from Deicide. Because at this time, I was definitely heavily getting into the very first two albums. I mean, I was listening to those two albums a lot. But it was, when I, to be quite honest, since then, I had, when getting those two, I was very hesitant and wanted to check on anything later after that because of hearing at least the fact that I guess there was a dip here and there. Always hearing there was a little bit of a dip after those two. I mean, I did check out Once Upon a Crossing, and another album that's actually highly regarded in the death metal community. But to be quite honest, I don't know whether that album completely blew me away, as I will say the very first two. But it was fine. But this album, I actually would say it might be unpopular, but I actually think I kind of like this more so than Once Upon a Cross. While it's definitely nowhere near as good as the very first two, it's fine. I mean, of course, it features former Cannibal Corpse alumni Jack Owen on board. Great guitar player. And of course, again, very different. This is more melodic, actually, compared to the sort of brutal assault of the very first two Deicide albums. It's more... this one might have more thrash metal influences. I mean, you might as well compare this to a little bit of the thrashiness of maybe the most recent Possessed album, which could have been a contender of being thrown in within this list, but I didn't. Again, it just has, it's very melodic, and it could be due to, who is the guy that's on here? Raph Santola, who of course was originally in the melodic, heavy power metal band Millennium. Who definitely, and you really can feel his presence in this album with a lot of the guitar solo, which are definitely less, they're more refined. I guess you can say this, which kind of makes it that the album might be more mature compared to the very earlier Deicide albums. But but the only thing that might not be completely mature is, of course, the lyrics. It's what you expect from Glenn Benton. It's definitely his honest opinions, what he thinks of Christianity and everything about that. You know, it's what you expect from him. But musically, it's definitely a more mature sound, though definitely, again, that might take away of what once made Deicide at least a great band, I guess you can say, or what made them youthful, what made them fan favorites within the death metal community. However, with this is still not a band. I mean, if you're at least interested in checking out a Deicide track off this album, I would say check out Conviction. It just has a very heavy mid-pace way of starting. It's a crushing riff. It's definitely good. I know since then Deicide have released a few more albums after this, and again, I hadn't checked those albums out. But I think in many ways this era of Deicide ain't bad at all. Again, nowhere near the era with the Hoffman brothers on board, but it's definitely at least good enough, not bad. And especially from this era, it was definitely a good way to start off Deicide's time in the 2010s. Again, still going. Speaking of course, when it comes to other well-renowned death metal bands, again, one of the most biggest stalwarts of the movement, I gotta talk about Cannibal Corpse with their 2014 album, Skeletal Domain. Now, again, with me and Cannibal Corpse, not a huge fan, though I like the early the stuff with Chris Barnes. Since then, it was kind of whether or not, same thing with Deicide. I don't know whether or not if I was interested, or at least to try and check out the Corpse Grinder Fisher era Cannibal Corpse albums. However, to be quite honest, I have to say, this was my first Corpse Grinder Fisher era Cannibal Corpse album that I checked out, and to be quite honest, this is actually a really good album from Cannibal Corpse, and for me, it's probably the best Cannibal Corpse album released probably since Butchered at Birth. It's got plenty of hooks on this album. I mean, Cannibal Corpse is a band that definitely were a band that never completely changed their sound, but as far as that, they're, I guess you can say, kind of similar like a band like AC/DC. They just got a little too comfortable in their sound and basically didn't feel like they had to change things up. This one, I would say, has some meat to it. It definitely has some oomph to it. It's a very solid album with some slightly thrashy riffs in there. Actually, one of the guitar players in the band was actually originally in the sort of, was a death thrash band Solstice, who released an album in 1992. I forgot the name of it. I think it was a self-titled, which that's a fantastic album. But again, it definitely adds in. It's in a really good album from it. There's just not a bad song. Definitely one of the most consistent albums, and probably, again, my favorite since Butchered at Birth. So they're at number 4. Or actually number 3. Again, okay, at number 3, A Skeleton Main from Cannibal Corpse. So, coming in at number 2, just similar with Barbarian, this one might be pushing it, but you know what? Since I added these guys in the thrash metal portion, I definitely, because these guys definitely fit in, at least in both videos. As it was, is Death Hammer. Again, probably again, the first band here, they're probably making a video, I think, twice, as far as I can review, though it may not be the first time. You'll see at least a few bands kind of transition to other videos, at least, I guess, at least crossover. So Death Hammer's the first one here. Again, in the thrash metal video, I showed Evil Power. Here, for my extreme metal video, I'm actually going to, again, use On My Way Through the Bits, because I think it's the best one. I would say fits this one. It's definitely more death thrash this time, instead of just being more speed thrash in many ways. I guess what Evil Power kind of sounded more. This one's got a little more of a death metal influence on here, though due to, again, very much inspired by the German thrash bands. This one definitely sounds more like a Crater album, actually, more so like Pleasure to Kill, which again, that might be off-putting, especially when talking about extreme metal, but to be quite honest, Crater for 1986 put out one of the most extreme-sounding thrash metal albums of all, in many ways, even topping Rain and Blood in terms of just sheer animosity and pure aggression. And a band like Death Hammer were definitely channeling that. It's definitely just a fucking good album, too. Again, the second, their follow-up to Phantom Nights from 2009. Just a good album all around. There's just nothing bad here. Voodoo Rites. Of course, just listen to Death Thrashing Sacrifice. The album starts out, it's got like early blast beats almost going on. In just many ways, it's just raw and brutal. Just great stuff. So, there at number 2 is Armor to the Pits by Death Hammer. So what's my number 1 extreme metal album of the 2010s? You know what? I guess I can say it was really easy. That's going to tip over. It's really easy. The Escalation from Australia's own Vomiter. Now, these guys, very similar to with Death Hammer, but to be quite honest, these guys have been going at since the early 2000s. Late 90s, early 2000s. These guys have been hammered it on since then. And definitely a band that takes, again, just also takes its influence from the German thrash band. But these guys add more of a death metal influence here. Especially if you had listened to their very first album, Bleeding the Priest, which definitely sounded like a long-lost Sodom album. Definitely sounded like somewhere in between In the Sign of Evil and Obsessed by Cruelty. This one, though, takes a little more influence from Obsessed by Cruelty. In many ways, due to the production, it's raw. It's completely just guttural. It definitely almost has that almost very demoish feel to it, which again kind of gives it it's almost I guess vintage sound. I guess you can say it's just great stuff. This definitely for sure has more death metal influences. Definitely taking influence maybe from like Deicide or Morbid Angel, I would say. I'll definitely hear quite an influence on this sound, but it's also got hooks too in some ways. I mean, goddamn, each time I listen to it, it just sticks to my head every fucking time. It was released back in 2012, and I know since then, Vomiter has released an album. Since then, was it last year, I think, or 2018? Didn't get around to listening to that one too. Same with Death Hammer. They both released an album, was it last year or 2018, and I just never got around to. But this album's just fantastic, and of course, Vomiter, their first album that actually, at least they had released in the 2010s, was actually Devil's Poison, which is good, but for some reason, this just sticks to me even more so than Devil's Poison, and definitely leaves more of an impression. It's just goddamn good stuff. So, there's my number one pick, or at least for my favorite extreme metal albums of 2010, from or at least the 2010s. Vomiter with the Escalation. There you go. There's pretty much my top 8 extreme metal releases of the 2010s. Let me know what were your favorite extreme metal releases from the 2010s. So with that, you can all say that in the comment section below. Within that, I hope you all enjoyed. I'll be back here with more end of the decade lists, and there's definitely, again, there's probably 5 more at this point. And we're not done. So I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all enjoyed the other ones, and I hope you all enjoyed the past ones. This is Every Thresh, I say I'm out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.